My name is Samantha Blake. I'm 31 years old, and I grew up in a small town near Lexington, Kentucky, where my family name used to be tied to a hardware store that had lasted 3 generations. Folks around there often said, a Blake kid will take over the shop for sure. Except me. From a young age, I realized I wasn't the center of my family's story. Every glance, every compliment, every ounce of expectation was aimed at my younger brother, Dylan. He's 2 years younger than me, an average student with a reckless streak, but somehow never lacked praise from our parents. Back in elementary school, when I brought home a state honor in a science competition, my mom barely looked at the certificate before sticking it to the fridge with an old magnet. The next week, Dylan placed third in the town's soccer league, and we threw a backyard barbecue with nearly 20 people invited. I remember clearly the day I got accepted into the county's only advanced math program. My dad said one short sentence. Ha, good. But you should learn to talk more naturally. Don't make people feel inferior. Meanwhile, when Dylan earned a C+ in history, my father popped open a bottle of wine. He improved. That's something to be proud of. I used to think maybe I just wasn't good enough. So I tried harder. I studied late, joined the debate team, won state medals, then nationals. Dylan stayed the same. Lazy, up all night gaming, constantly getting into trouble at school. But whenever something happened, my mom would hug him tight and chant like a prayer, "He just needs understanding." He has such a special heart. Me, I was handed all the quiet duties, cooking, laundry, cleaning the garage, even checking Dylan's homework before each exam. If I said no, my mother would look at me like a stranger. Family is about sacrifice, Samantha. How can you be so selfish? By high school, the gap widened. I was accepted to a summer program at Georgia Tech for top engineering students. My father sighed. You should study something more practical. Don't chase dreamy stuff. That same summer, Dylan was suspended for fighting after gym class. My mom took him to Disneyland to reduce stress. When I got into Vanderbilt for biochemistry on a full scholarship, no one in the family came to see me off. I rolled my suitcase to the bus station alone while they stayed home to throw Dylan an 18th birthday party with a live band. I still have an old photo, me sitting in a tiny dorm room in Nashville, holding a cold slice of pizza, calling it my freshman send-off. 4 years later, I graduated at the top of my class and was recruited directly into a regenerative medicine center in Atlanta. I sent a letter home to share the news, only to get a short reply from my mom. Good for you. Dylan's thinking about starting a car wash. We're really excited. That's when I understood. To them, I wasn't the child to be proud of. I was the one who could take care of herself, so didn't need attention. In their eyes, Dylan was the one who needed protecting, even at 27, despite never holding a job longer than 6 months. I got used to not being mentioned at family gatherings, used to the distant looks from relatives when I introduced myself. Oh, you're one of the Blakes. I know your brother Dylan, but I don't think we've met. I've heard that line more times than I can count. It's not that I didn't love my family. I once craved their recognition, just once. But sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you can't overpower the assumptions people cling to about the ones they've already decided to love. 3 years after earning my PhD and officially starting as a lead researcher at the Jefferson Cancer Center in Atlanta, my father passed away from a sudden stroke. It happened on a September morning, right as he was sorting through bills at the kitchen table. My mother called me at 6:30 a.m., her voice trembling. Your father collapsed, Samantha. The doctor said he didn't make it. I went home that very day. The funeral was held at a Baptist church in Harlan, the same one where my dad had once fixed the plumbing for free because God would take care of the interest. Everyone wore dark colors, spoke in hushed tones, and my mother stood by the casket without shedding a single tear. Dylan was unusually quiet, not from grief, but because he was already thinking about the house. 2 weeks after the funeral, my mother pulled me aside in the backyard. She twisted the sleeves of her beige cardigan, eyes fixed on nothing. I can't manage anymore, she said. The mortgage, utilities, maintenance. It's too much. I nodded. I knew. My father had been the only steady source of income. Dylan, as usual, was still figuring things out, as my mother liked to say. Dylan suggested if you're willing to invest, you two could buy the house together and divide it. I'd live in the finished basement, Dylan on the first floor, and you upstairs. I paused for a few seconds, then asked, "Is he planning to contribute anything?" He said he would once things stabilized. I said nothing else. Over the next week, I sent all the documents to my personal attorney, Andrea Keller, a sharp-tongued woman with neatly silvered hair and eyes that missed nothing. After reviewing the sale details, Andrea strongly advised I outline ownership percentages in the agreement. I'd pay 70% of the home's value, Dylan 30%, with funding from his fiancée, Stephanie, and my mother would have no ownership, only the right to reside in the basement contingent on mutual consent. This is family, but even families need the law to protect them, Andrea said bluntly. If you don't define your rights, they'll treat you like a walking wallet. We signed everything in early December. I moved into the top floor, a quiet studio I redesigned myself. A compact kitchen, a private bedroom, and a workspace with a wide window overlooking the backyard's maple trees that flamed red every fall. Dylan and Stephanie settled on the first floor and immediately resumed hosting gatherings with his old basketball buddies. My mother treated the basement like neutral territory, lighting scented candles and watching old TV shows on DVDs. I respected boundaries. Each of us had our own kitchen, mailbox, and space. Every month, I made the payment for Dylan's portion because by the second year, he was consistently late. When I reminded him, Stephanie would flash a tight smile. "Don't worry, he's getting ready to launch his project." I never found out what that project was. Whenever I left town for conferences, the house became oddly lively. I once returned from San Diego to find the living room couch broken and saw stains on the rug. Dylan shrugged. Yes, things got a little wild. I clenched my jaw, but said nothing. I was waiting, quietly gathering enough reason to act. The following spring, I discovered my mother had been entering my space while I was at work. Not once, but multiple times. One day I found a note on my desk. "You should put this cup somewhere else. It could fall." The cup broke 2 days later. I didn't confront her. Instead, I began a photo log, capturing every change, every sign that my boundaries were being breached. The house I once thought might rebuild closeness with my family had slowly turned into a psychological test chamber I never signed up for. I had just returned from a 4-day conference in Boston, where my research team presented preliminary results on an immunotherapy treatment for pancreatic cancer. For the first time in 6 years, I felt like my sacrifices hadn't been in vain. A professor from Johns Hopkins expressed interest in a long-term collaboration. I printed the proposal and brought it home, planning to share the good news over a family dinner that weekend. I was too naive. The moment the Uber pulled up at the corner near my house, I sensed something was off. Both sides of the street were lined with unfamiliar cars, stretching all the way to the backyard. String lights hung above the front door, and someone had stuck in American flags in a gaudy yellow banner. I thought I had the wrong address until I saw the silver SUV with a Go Wildcats sticker. Aunt Elaine's car from Kentucky, parked right in front of my garage. I wheeled my suitcase across the stone path, heart pounding. Hanging on the front door was a wooden sign, "Blake Ridley Family Reunion - Welcome Home." I froze. Home? This was my house, and I wasn't invited. I unlocked the door. Country music blared from a Bluetooth speaker. In the living room, kids were running wild like bees from a busted hive. A man I didn't recognize was sitting on my sofa, eating something off a paper plate. The abstract painting I'd hung on the wall was gone, replaced by a giant family portrait of the Blakes from 1997. I wasn't in it. The first person to notice me was my cousin Kimberly, the same one I hadn't seen since high school graduation. She shrieked, "Oh my God, Samantha, you're back? We thought you weren't coming until tomorrow morning." That sentence fired the starting pistol. The whole house stirred. Laughter stopped. Chewing paused. Dozens of relatives turned to look at me like I was an intruder. I stood in the doorway, my suitcase still by my side, eyes sweeping across the room. Not one person noticed the surge of discomfort coursing through me like a live wire. My mother, Sharon, was sitting at the head of the dining table, chatting with a group of older relatives. Her smile vanished the second she saw me, replaced by a strange flicker of embarrassment. "You're home early," she said, standing up and adjusting her shawl. "I thought your flight was Sunday morning." "You thought I should have known that nearly 100 people would be inside my house," I replied, voice steady. Dylan emerged from the kitchen, carrying a tray of pastries. "Surprise, Sam! We're throwing a family reunion. First time, nearly everyone's here." I stared directly into my brother's eyes. Did I receive a single message about this? "We were going to clean everything up before you got back." Ah, so that includes cleaning out my privacy and property rights, too? I wheeled my suitcase upstairs. My bedroom door was unlocked. Inside was a nightmare. Strange blankets on the bed. My belongings shoved into corners. My desk was being used as a dessert buffet. Cake wrappers, sugar crumbs, sticky napkins smeared across the surface. A child's crayon drawing was taped over my framed award from the American College of Clinical Medicine. The bathroom reeked of cheap air freshener, and the medicine cabinet had clearly been rummaged through. I said nothing. I just began taking photos. Every corner, every detail. I entered the bedroom, opened a drawer. My underwear had been pushed aside to make room for children's clothes. I sat at the edge of the bed, took a deep breath. A message pinged from Dylan. "Everyone's asking where you are. Don't make a scene. This is a rare occasion." I didn't respond. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to my lawyer, Andrea, with the subject line, "Breach of agreement, unauthorized use of private property, urgent." Then I locked the door from the inside, opened my laptop, and pulled up the email from the professor in Boston. I clicked, "Accept invitation to collaborate." They wanted to turn this house into a stage for their legacy? Fine, but I wasn't here to be their backdrop. The storm hadn't hit yet, but I had already drawn the map. I stayed in the room for over an hour, and not a single person knocked to check on me. No apologies, no explanations, just laughter, the clinking of dishes, and music growing louder downstairs. As if I didn't exist. I got up and opened the closet to look for the box that held my grandmother's vintage perfume, the only thing I kept after she'd passed. The green, velvet-lined mahogany box was gone. I tore through every drawer, moved a stack of documents aside. Nothing. I stepped into the bathroom. Fingerprints smudged the mirror. On the counter, my toner had been replaced with some off-brand cleanser. A light gray towel, not mine, hung crookedly on the metal rack. When I leaned over the trash bin, my heart dropped. Tiny shards of glass, carrying a faint, sweet, familiar scent. One large piece still had the words Avignon 1956 etched on it, the vintage perfume bottle. Shattered. I leaned against the sink, fingers clenched so tightly they turned white. That wasn't just an object. It was memory. The last trace of the only woman who ever called me her pride. The air in the room felt thick. I picked up my phone and turned on the camera, snapped photos of everything. The scratch on the mirror frame, the shards in the trash, the foreign beauty products, the coffee stains on my desk. I turned back to the bed and lifted the blanket. On my bedsheet was a faint print of pale orange lipstick. Someone had slept here, done their makeup here, lived here, in the space I had saved for and designed myself over 4 years. A soft knock. Then Stephanie, Dylan's wife, spoke from the hallway. "Sam, you okay in there? Dylan says you're being a little sensitive." I didn't open the door. "Who slept in my room?" I asked, my voice hoarse but steady. "Just Aunt Ruth and Uncle Ben. They're older. They couldn't manage the basement stairs." "I'm on the top floor." "Yeah, but they arrived early and everyone thought you were coming Sunday." I sat back on the edge of the bed and typed a short email to Andrea, confirming unauthorized individuals used private room and damaged personal property. Photos attached. Please advise on next steps. 1 minute later, my phone rang. It was Andrea. "Samantha, they've clearly violated the terms of agreement. I recommend you document everything on video from now on and avoid direct conversations. Do you have indoor cameras?" "No." I'll send over a contract for a private security service. You can sign and install within 24 hours. Also, don't respond to any of them unless it's via email. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. And if I want to evict unauthorized occupants? Absolutely possible if you can prove their presence is unauthorized and caused property damage. I ended the call, opened my camera app, and began filming a panoramic video of the room. I narrated every detail. Filing cabinet opened, lock broken, bookshelf moved, stain on carpet, mattress has deep indentations, unfamiliar scent in the room, heirloom destroyed. I had planned to stay the night, but when I discovered my backup phone charger was plugged in under the bed and the screen read, "Not your account," I made my decision. I texted Madison, my best friend from college who lived 20 minutes away. Need a place to crash. House has been invaded. Details later. She called me back in under 30 seconds. Let me guess, Dylan again. This time, the whole clan. Front doors unlocked, blankets on the couch, apple pies on the table. I packed in silence. Documents, laptop, backup drive, and the few valuable things left. As I went downstairs, I passed through the living room. Someone was projecting a slideshow. On the screen, photo after photo of Dylan, my mom, and the extended family at the beach. Not a single one of me. Aunt Carol turned to me as I walked by. "Oh, Samantha, when did you get in? Dylan told us you were the one financially supporting this house. So generous of you." I simply smiled, nodded politely, and stepped out the front door. Before closing it, I turned for one last look. My mother was laughing loudly, holding a glass of white wine. Dylan was telling a story that had the whole table in stitches. No one looked in my direction. In that moment, I understood more clearly than ever, I had never truly been a part of this family. I was just the one who stayed quiet long enough for them to normalize the trespass. But I wouldn't stay quiet anymore. I returned to the house the next morning, unannounced. I walked into the living room just as everyone was having breakfast. The room fell silent the moment I appeared. The sound of knives and forks stopped abruptly. My mother turned to me with fake surprise. "Samantha, I thought you stayed over in Boston." "I stayed somewhere with a locked door," I replied, taking off my coat, my voice calm but each word clear. Dylan got up from his chair and started walking toward me as if trying to intervene quickly. Stephanie stayed seated, her hands tightening around her coffee cup. "Sam," Dylan said, "nobody meant any harm. Yesterday was just a misunderstanding." I looked straight into my brother's eyes. A misunderstanding is when someone accidentally does something wrong. This was intentional concealment. "That's not fair," Stephanie cut in. "We thought you didn't care about this family. You're never around for gatherings. You live like you're somewhere else. Whether you're here or not, it feels the same." I paused for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. "So you felt no need to ask before bringing nearly 100 people into a space I own?" My mother sighed and stood up. "Enough, Samantha. You always make everything a big deal. People came out of love, but you're always busy, always locking yourself away in your lab. Do you really think anyone in this family even knows what you actually do?" That sentence cut like a knife. I pulled my phone from my pocket and quickly played a clip from the conference in Boston, holding it out toward my mother. The screen showed me presenting to over 500 medical professionals, applause echoing in the background. "I'm developing a treatment for pancreatic cancer. This week, I was invited to lead a federal project." But sure, go ahead and say I'm never present. Maybe it's because what I do isn't considered important around here. The room felt thick with tension. Dylan cleared his throat, clearly flustered. "You shouldn't hold on to everything forever. I think if you're really that busy, maybe it's time to consider selling your share of the house. You don't have time to take care of it anyway." I looked up. "Repeat that." "We're planning to have a baby," Stephanie interjected, gripping Dylan's hand, "and we really need more space. If you moved out, everything would be easier." Space. That word made me want to laugh. I had spent my entire youth just trying to carve out a square foot I could call mine, and now they wanted me to hand it over like a wedding gift. I folded my arms and stared at the two of them. How much money do you have in your accounts? Stephanie frowned. What does that have to do with? It's obvious, I cut her off. You don't need space, you need money. So who really cares about this house? Neither of them said a word. My mother looked at me like I had just said something vile. Samantha, how could you insult your own brother like that? I'm not insulting, I said evenly. I'm stating facts. That evening, while checking the shared printer folder on the ground floor, I found a file someone had forgotten to remove. The cover was blue, labeled Application Bridge Loan Solutions. I opened it. Inside were interest rate sheets for 2 rejected personal loans, a credit report with a shockingly low score, and another document, Request for Second Mortgage, signed by Dylan Blake. I picked up the phone and called Andrea. I need to verify the legality of a refinance attempt made without co-owner consent. Andrea responded immediately. If they proceeded without your signature, it's a serious violation. Send me all the documents you have. I'll take action. I carefully photographed every page, then returned the folder to exactly where I found it, as if I had never touched it. I knew one thing for certain. Next time they overstepped, I wouldn't need to argue. I would use the law. I stayed up all night, not out of anger, but because my brain was working like a precision machine. I made a list of every task, every deadline, every person I needed to contact. If Dylan and Stephanie thought I would back down like before, they had picked the wrong person. The next morning, I scheduled an emergency meeting with Andrea Keller, my attorney. We met at 8 a.m. in her midtown office. Andrea wore a light gray suit, her hair pulled into a high ponytail, and her eyes sharp as a scalpel. I've reviewed all the documents you sent, she began, flipping through a file with a deep red cover. They're attempting to refinance a co-owned property without your signature or consent. Clear violation. What's your plan? I don't want to sell, but I also don't want to live with them anymore. I want to rent out my portion with a professional property manager. Andrea nodded, jotting notes. Then we'll need 2 things. A petition establishing rental rights per your ownership agreement, and a contract with a reputable property management firm. Do you have a company in mind? I shook my head. But I do have one requirement. They must have experience handling co-owned properties and be unafraid of legal tension. I know just the place, Andrea replied. I worked with them during a sibling estate split in New Hampshire. Thought it was just minor friction. Turned out to be high-level fraud. They handled it with absolute professionalism. Just a few hours later, I was sitting inside the offices of Willow and Hart Property Management, a firm headquartered in Roswell specializing in complex real estate operations. I was met by Camille Hart, a poised woman in her early 40s with a demeanor as composed as it was unyielding. After I explained everything, Camille gave a brief smile. We're no strangers to families who preach blood is thicker than water while reaching into each other's wallets. You have clear ownership, defined space, and evidence of breach. We can take it from here. I want security cameras, smart locks, and full control over the second floor. They're not allowed up there anymore. We'll have a tech team on site this week. Legally, you still have full rights to your portion under the existing agreement, and we'll handle any disputes directly with them. That afternoon, I drove to the bank and retrieved all original documents related to the house purchase. Bank records, payment history from my first year to present. I stuffed everything into a thick folder and hand-delivered it to Andrea. I want a fully documented legal trail, I said. They're used to manipulating with words, but I'm not letting a single sentence go unrecorded. Andrea nodded. From now on, all communication will be via email only. No direct conversations, no texting. If they knock, you don't have to answer. That night, I sent my first email to Dylan, CCing Stephanie and my mother. I'm initiating steps to protect my ownership and personal space, following multiple violations of our agreement. All further communication will be in writing. Please do not approach me directly. No one replied within 24 hours, but I did receive a long, rambling text from my mother. You're tearing this family apart over small things. They're just trying to settle down. You're being too rigid, Samantha. Your father hasn't been gone that long. You should think about family blood. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to Andrea with a note. This is the emotional manipulation I warned you about. 2 days later, Camille and her tech team arrived. They surveyed the second floor, remeasured the square footage, and drafted a separate management map. One technician installed discrete cameras along the hallway leading to my private staircase. The new digital lock was fingerprint coded and controlled via mobile app. After they left, I received an email from Camille. Ready to host temporary tenants starting the 10th. Shortlist includes 3 candidates, an internal medicine resident, a college professor, and a novelist. I reviewed each application carefully, not because I needed the extra income, but because I was redefining control within the very space where I had once been treated like an outsider. 3 days after the security system was installed and the property management contract officially took effect, I received an email titled Invitation, Zurich, Immunotherapy Initiative. The sender was Professor Klaus Reinhardt, Executive Director of the Swiss Center for Molecular Medicine. In the message, he wrote, "We were very impressed by your presentation at the Boston conference last week. Based on your team's current direction, we would like to invite you to lead the T-cell immunology research group in Zurich. It's a 3-year contract, competitive salary, housing support, and full control over experimental design. If possible, please respond within 10 days. I read the email 3 times. My heart was pounding, like the first time I stepped into a lab. This opportunity wasn't just a career move, it was a way out of the tangled vines of guilt and distorted family duty. I called Andrea first. I just received a job offer in Zurich. If I go, will my assets and rights here be affected? No, as long as you retain ownership and continue using a third-party manager, she answered immediately. In fact, this gives you a clearer reason to separate from any of their claims. Then I called Madison. Zurich, she screamed over the phone. Are you really moving to Europe? 3 years? Possibly extendable? What are you going to tell your mom? I'm not asking for permission. That evening, I sat alone in my second-floor unit, doors locked, cameras softly blinking blue. I looked at the walls that had once felt like shelter, then became a violated space. I opened my closet, pulled out a large suitcase, and started folding clothes. I didn't tell anyone in the house, no notes. The next morning, I sent an email to Dylan, CC'd Stephanie and my mother, attaching legal documents from Andrea. I will be working abroad for the next 3 years. My owned portion of the property will be fully managed by Willow and Hart. For any inquiries related to the property, please contact Camille Hart at the attached address. I will not engage in any personal discussions regarding this matter. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Dylan. I didn't pick up. Then my mom, then Stephanie, then Aunt Carol, then Uncle Vernon, like the whole family suddenly realized I had value once they sensed they were losing access to me. I texted Madison. It's starting. She replied, proud of you. Don't look back. Before leaving Atlanta, I went to the bank and signed over financial power of attorney to Andrea, then stopped by the health insurance center to transfer my medical records to the international system. At the airport during security check, I glanced at the e-ticket reading ATL SZRH, and for the first time in years, I smiled without feeling the need to apologize. Zurich greeted me with light snow and crisp air. The apartment arranged by the Research Institute was in the Seafield district, quiet, lakeside, near small bakeries and old bookstores I fell in love with on my first walk. On my first day at the lab, I was given a tour of the research sectors: cellular biology, immune modeling, genetic programming systems. My team had 6 members from Brazil, India, Germany, and Belgium. No one knew I had once been the invisible child in the Blake family. Here, I was simply Dr. Samantha Blake, an expert in next-generation T-cell immunity strategies. We worked tirelessly from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Each evening, I stood by the lab window, gazing at the Alps in the distance, no longer feeling small, no longer bracing myself to survive among relatives who never really saw me. A month later, I received an email from Camille. A new tenant has moved into the second floor, a visiting professor from UCLA. Full 6-month payment, no complaints from any parties, although Dylan has called 3 times with vague comments about his right to stay. I typed back, "Proceed exactly per contract. Please disregard any non-written communication." Right after, I received a message from my mother. "Can you reconsider? Family is forever. I'm getting old. You leaving like this breaks my heart." I stared at that message for a long time, then set my phone down without replying. For the first time in my life, I truly understood. Love cannot grow where only obligation exists. And freedom isn't about running away. It's about walking away from what no longer deserves you. One March morning in Zurich, while I was examining test samples in the lab, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Andrea. The subject line simply read, "Formal proposal from Dylan Blake." I washed my hands, took off my gloves, and sat down to open it. Attached was an offer to buy out the entire ownership of the house at market value, along with a separate payment to terminate the management agreement and any remaining legal claims related to past disputes. At the end of the letter was one short line. "We secured a loan from Stephanie's family. We just want to settle things." I wasn't surprised. Camille had already informed me last month that Dylan had been persistently calling the management firm, trying to negotiate a long-term solution. The new tenants on the second floor had become stable. Rent was flowing steadily into my account every quarter. It seemed the idea of living indefinitely under the presence of a third party had made Dylan realize he no longer held center stage in that house. I called Andrea to confirm every detail, then asked her to include one final clause in the contract. Oh, I want to allocate 20% of the proceeds to create a scholarship fund named after my father, Mr. Arthur Blake, for medical students in Kentucky who come from low-income backgrounds. Andrea was silent for a few seconds before smiling through the phone. "Wise, not for Dylan, but because your father deserves to be remembered the right way." The deal was finalized within 3 weeks. I e-signed from the research office in Zurich, then sat quietly for a long time looking at the new ownership certificate, now entirely under Dylan and Stephanie's names. The old house, once my battlefield, was officially no longer mine, and I didn't feel sad. I notified Camille and thanked her for helping me reclaim control over my life during its darkest chapter. She replied with one simple sentence, "Smart women know when to fight and when to walk away. You've done both." 6 months later, I returned to the US for the first time to attend the national conference in Boston. After my presentation, I traveled to Lexington for the first Arthur Blake Scholarship ceremony. As I stepped onto the stage, I noticed my mother sitting in the back row, silently nodding. After the event, she approached me. No hug, no tears, just handed me an envelope. "It's from your father. He wrote it when you got into college, but I kept it. I didn't think you needed it." I took the letter, said nothing. That night back at the hotel, I opened it. The familiar handwriting of my father read, "Samantha, if you're reading this, it means you've chosen your own path. Your mother doesn't understand you the way I do, but that's not her fault. Don't let a lack of recognition stop you. You were born to change something, maybe a disease, a system, or even the definition of family itself." I folded the letter and placed it in my wallet. I'll carry it with me for the rest of my life. A quiet reminder. Dylan didn't show up at the ceremony, but a week later, I received an email from him. For the first time, no capitalized subject, no excuses. I saw the news about the scholarship. Stephanie said if Dad were alive, he'd have cut the ribbon himself. I think so too. Thank you for not turning everything into revenge. Maybe someday we can meet again without bitterness. I didn't reply, but I saved the message, just like I've saved the good things we once had, not to return to them, but to remember how far I've come. In Zurich, I live in an apartment overlooking the lake. On weekends, I tutor undergraduates, write academic books, and grow rosemary by the windowsill. I don't open my door for anyone who doesn't respect my space, and I no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone. Family, to me, is no longer defined by blood. It's made up of those who see you even when you're standing alone. And perhaps in that clarity of solitude, I finally found the one thing I had lost for so long: myself. Samantha's story is proof that sometimes, in order to find yourself, you have to walk away from what's called family. In real life, there are ties bound by blood, but lacking in respect and recognition. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's the first step in protecting your self-worth. Samantha didn't choose revenge, she chose freedom, and to live according to what she believed she deserved. And sometimes that is the deepest form of forgiveness, not staying to resent, but leaving to be whole. What do you think of Samantha's choice? Would you have done the same in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories and powerful life lessons.